All right, trying to multitask a little bit here. I figure we're just going to talk about the bills anyways, so I'm going to get my thoughts kind of down for you. You then can kind of go through and ask more specific questions when we do start working together. I'm going to go straight down the legislation. Don't pre-write speeches. Write out outlines and arguments. Don't worry about getting crazy points. We are going here in order to expose you to different styles, bring back some stuff, see best practices out here, and we want you to get a lot of NFL points. So we want you to get a lot of speeches in, and that's the main focus that we're going on. You're not going to be in the same chambers, and so you'll have no problem working together. Focus on one side of each bill. If you have extra time, then go towards the other side. So the first bill is a bill to remove the cap on individual donations to political candidates. Right now, you're allowed to donate over the course of an entire election cycle $5,600 to one individual candidate, and at one moment $2,800 for each of those primary general elections, which is where you get that $5,600. So if I want to donate to Joe Biden, I could have donated $2,800 in the primary, and I could have donated $2,800 in the general election. However, there are a ton of ways around this at this point in time. The idea being that I can contribute to a political action committee or a PAC or a super PAC. These super PACs have allowed in waves of dark money. So I get around campaign finance laws by, instead of giving my money to Joe Biden, which I'm capped at, I'm going to give it to America for Joe Biden, a super PAC. Now, super PACs are not allowed to directly coordinate with the candidate. However, they indirectly coordinate all the time. So if I'm the head of the super PAC, I can go to an intermediary, somebody who's close to Joe Biden, and say, boy, what would Joe Biden, if he had a lot of money, like to spend it on? And that intermediary might give an answer, or they might go to Joe Biden and say, hey, if we had the ability to spend a whole lot more money, what would we do it on? Joe Biden tells the intermediary tells the super PAC goes and does it. These super PACs are dangerous because it's somewhat dark money. They can have innocuous names like Americans for Joe Biden, and you don't really know who's running the super PAC. You also don't know where the money's coming from, how many donors they have, and the amounts, and so this all fits into dark money or hidden money. Now, getting rid of the caps would mean that I don't have to give my money to a super PAC anymore, which you can attack as being bad if you're on the affirmative. I could give it directly to the candidate. They have to report everything, and that's public reporting. So if I'm like a famous private prison owner and investor, and they see that I give $3 million to Joe Biden, that's going to get out, and that's going to look really bad for Joe Biden. It's going to look like I bought a politician, that he's in my pocket, etc., those types of things. Politicians don't want that. So the affirmative team can argue that super PACs are really bad, that they have exploded dark money, and that getting rid of the caps will allow for more public reporting and more disclosure of who it is. A Supreme Court justice, you can look up who it is, said that sunlight is the greatest disinfectant, meaning we want to bring things out of the shadows and bring them into the light with this possibly could. It's also necessary to combat corporations. So corporations, ever since a Supreme Court case with the FEC involved, has been able to donate pretty much whatever they want, and they can do massive $1 million. The argument in that Supreme Court case said that corporations have free speech as well, and free speech is about campaign contributions. It's protected under that First Amendment, that type of thing. And so being able to give more individually can offset some of those high corporation investments, that type of stuff. The negative is going to say this is absolutely terrible, money is bad, and this increases the power and influence of the rich. Most candidates, both the Trump administration and the Biden administration, were very, very proud that their average donor was a very low number. That's the idea of getting a plethora of support across the spectrum and then using those small donations to add up to really big, huge, massive numbers. When you take a cap off, The small donor is not affected because most donors are not giving 2,800 or even the 5,600 at this point in time. Most of them are giving small amounts. And so if we remove the cap, it doesn't help them anymore. However, a multi-billionaire would be able to give massive amounts, which would drown out the voice of the younger person. It's on the burden of the affirmative team to explain what's wrong with our system and why this helps our system. And so I think negatively, you can approach the idea there. Second bill is a bill to amend the Constitution to reverse Citizens United. This is really about the same exact subject, and so you're probably only going to debate one of the first two. Citizens United is that Supreme Court case that ruled that corporations have voices. That allowed for corporations to start donating and speaking on behalf of candidates because they have free speech. This is a really easy one to research. It's easier to go negative on because Citizens United is like one of the really bad Supreme Court cases as far as the effects go, because it has flooded campaigns with corporation money, dark money, etc., those types of things. The original case was about whether a corporation could air an anti-Hillary Clinton documentary right before 2016's election, and they won, finding out that they had free speech as a corporation. They were allowed to speak, and political speech is protected. Okay, so this is a really simple one to research. All you have to do is type in reverse Citizens United, and you'll get all of the affirmative stuff that you need. It is a constitutional amendment because the Supreme Court has ruled that Citizens United has free speech, and so you would have to go to a constitutional amendment for that. Okay, so really simple, very easy to research for that one. So, T visas are human trafficking visas. Ben Hoham and Hattie Hoham actually ran a case about human trafficking and stopping human trafficking, and they won state debate a couple of years on it, that type of stuff. So Section 2 is going to explain what T visas are. They're one of two visas they can utilize to keep a non-immigrant legally in the U.S. as protection from human trafficking. A T1 visa is specifically used for an applicant who is a victim of human trafficking. Unusual or severe harm indicates the applicant would be able to achieve a stable livelihood if would not be able to if they return to their home country. President Trump has closed off borders to refugees, to a whole bunch of other things. Ultimately, the T visa is one of them that protects for human trafficking. Human trafficking is just when somebody is basically stolen and they are moved forcibly against somewhere. These are oftentimes women, but not exclusively. They are oftentimes violently, mentally, and physically abused. The change in here is that the requirement to prove removal from the U.S. would cause unusual or severe harm shall be eliminated. So basically, AF will say if somebody is a victim of human trafficking and they can prove that they are a part of human trafficking, they get to stay no matter what. Previously, or in the status quo, we remove them if we think they'll be okay in their home country. But there's a lot of good evidence that trafficking victims are prone to re-trafficking, meaning that if they return home, they are going to get re-trafficked and more problems are going to happen. Some of their family problems will happen, those types of things. So the AF is going to argue that, honestly, human trafficking, you should always go AF. We reject it as a policy debate topic every single year at the topic selection meeting because there's just not enough neg ground. You can prove that trafficking is horrific, it's really bad, it's easily proved, it's not faked too much. We need them to cooperate with us, and so if we take this hostile aspect to it, it makes it very difficult. Sending them to their home country invites re-trafficking, which is really, really bad, those types of things. So anytime on human trafficking, I would always go AF. The fourth one is a bill to close Guantanamo Bay. Okay, Guantanamo Bay used to be a Navy base. That Navy base got turned into a prison in the War on Terror. Okay, we pay about $50 every single year in order to lease it out. It's a part of the old Spanish-American War Treaty, and it bugs the heck out of Cuba. It used to be one of the great military bases of the world. Now it is this shameful type of prison. So President Barack Obama, when he was a candidate, ran on the promise that he would close Guantanamo Bay. He did not fulfill that promise. And so if you're looking to go negative, you can look at how President Obama did a turnaround. He thought that it was horrible, terrible, bad, awful, etc. However, once he saw the intel on who these people were, he then ultimately kept it open. He worked really hard to close the amount of people by shifting them to their home countries. But we now have President Bush, President Obama, and President Trump who have all looked at this information, and they have all assured us, bipartisan, that these are the worst of the worst, that we can't send them anywhere else. One of the fears of sending them back home is that they'll be executed, murdered, tortured, etc., because these are really, really bad guys. Another fear is if we close them and don't send them to their home country and we bring them into America, there will be technicalities in the way that we got evidence from them and did not give them due process, so that it could possibly, on technicalities, force them out of the system. If you want to go AF, you're going to talk about human rights. These people were arrested, they were hidden and obscured, they weren't given access to lawyers. There's a number of them that started a hunger strike to commit suicide so that they would die. We forcibly put feeding tubes down their throats. So we have not given them trials, we will not sentence them, and we won't let them die, meaning they're just stuck there in perpetuity without the ability to try to prove their innocence or any chance to ever get free. Guantanamo Bay is used in propaganda against us in the war on terror. It's used as propaganda whenever we go to China and we shout out things like, look what you're doing in your camps about genocide. China shoots back at us a bunch of things, including like Black Lives Matter, voting, and Guantanamo Bay, as well as bombing the Middle East and all kinds of stuff. And so it's a blight on our human rights record. Okay? Section 2B is really key here because it specifically says they'll get a full trial. That would be living up to our ideals. That's where we get to the technicality issue. A lot of constitutional scholars believe that that could trigger their freedom and we would be releasing really, really evil people. Furthermore, it probably leads to their executions because these are federal crimes that they are guilty of. Remember, these are not the 9/11 hijackers. These are crimes that they committed in plotting or conspiracy or on battlefields against our soldiers. You could argue there's better alternatives, military tribunals to actually sentence them, give them trials, but keep them in Guantanamo Bay so you don't trigger technicalities or all possibilities that you can do there. You do have an economic trade-off. $3 million of the Department of Defense's own budget for the organization of trials, that probably doesn't have much effect. It's a straw man argument that is designed to distract you. Okay? They are only closing the detention center, so it probably then reverts back to a military base. You could make the argument that the reverting back of a military base to its original purpose is probably a good thing. Generally speaking, I'm AF on closing Guantanamo Bay. I don't know that if I'm AF on Section 2B, where they are brought back to the United States. First off, they've never been on United States soil ever before, and so you're not really bringing them back. Okay? So the next bill is going to be about marijuana. Section 1 tells you that the Attorney General will finalize removing marijuana from the Schedule of Controlled Substance, distribution, criminal penalties, that type of stuff. So first off, the fact that it says that the Attorney General, we're talking about federal legalization here. You're going to remove it from the substance and control list. That's going to fix the federalism issue where states like Colorado, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, and Kentucky all have legalized marijuana. Yet, because it is illegal federally, those companies are technically dealing drugs still. This would remove that because those states would no longer violate federal law in any way, shape, or form. Right now, the cannabis businesses can't get access to boats, they probably can get access to boats, but they can't get access to banks. That is because it's illegal for banks to hand out loans or to accept money from known drug dealers. So these banks are oftentimes prone to robbery. They are also unable to get investments that could blow up their business quite a bit more. And that leads to companies in Canada and Mexico who are legal companies actually undercutting US business. Oddly enough, the marijuana business is really key to economic recovery for a lot of states because of the coronavirus. They're getting less tax revenue and they're getting more expenses because they're doing more bailouts. So a lot of the states that are legalizing are looking to get the tax revenue. When it's an illegal drug, the state doesn't profit off of it. However, when it becomes a legal drug, now they profit off of sales tax and business property ownership tax, those types of things. So the point of this bill is to let the states who have legalized marijuana have it not be a federal law. This would not affect Indiana because Indiana state law still has marijuana illegal. It could put pressure for full legalization, but in the end, Indiana would be unaffected. But the 20 or so states that are, their businesses would be able to get money, access, banks, safety, security, all those types of things. They'd be able to grow their business, which is going to have huge economic effects. I would recommend going AF on this. There's also an idea of looking back on cases about expunging convictions. You can get an advantage there about helping minorities who are stuck in prison, reducing prison expenses. This is a pretty cool bill. I would definitely go AF on it though, not neg. Bill for emergency relief for Somalia. We're going to give $250 million in emergency relief in Somalia that will go to aid food insecurity and alleviate crowding in camps due to COVID-19. Our history of Somalia begins in the 1990s. In 1992, we did a military exercise in an attempt to help feed the people of Somalia. Ultimately, it was not successful. Warlords had taken over the country. Now it's divided into two, and it's been in a constant state of civil war for about the last 30 plus years. We don't have a huge involvement in Somalia, but if you'd like to help Somalia, number one, that's a nice thing to do. Number two, these camps are fertile recruiting ground for terrorism. And obviously, because of COVID, refugee camps are not going to be good for the spread. It's never good for food insecurity, malnutrition. And so by helping to solve some of this, you continue to help a country that we loosely were involved with in the 1990s. We didn't screw them up. They were already screwed up when we jumped in. But we abandoned them pretty quickly in our efforts. Two, you'd be able to reduce malnutrition, suffering. You can tug on the heartstrings, those elements, that type of stuff. And three, you can help reduce terrorist recruitment elements in there. If you're going to go negative, there's probably arguments here that $250 million is not enough. Number two, at this point in time, a lot of Americans and your constituents are specifically going to rebel against this because they need help. We're waiting on a second coronavirus relief bill, and if we are giving $250 million to Somalia for food insecurity, that's probably insensitive to your constituents who are also job and food insecure at this point in time. So I think it's very easy to argue look, it's great to help, but we're not in a position where we can help, and our constituents really require us not to. You can also on neg go after Section 3. U.S. aid, they're not corrupt by any means, but they're inefficient and ineffective. And aid has not really helped Somalia in the past. It gets gobbled up very, very quickly and oftentimes is prone to corruption, those elements. And so you can attack Section 3 on the neg as well and say that U.S. aid is not good. The next one is a bill to create domestic jobs while ending offshoring expenditures. So offshoring is when a business decides to move offshore from America. They oftentimes do this because the tax situation is going to be better and it ends up working out for them where they can save money or they can get access to something else. President Trump has worked really hard to limit offshoring, personally going after companies that have and trying to keep them in there. We've also done tax cuts and tax incentives in order to keep our businesses here. We want our businesses here because A, they pay taxes here, which are good for the government, and B, they create jobs, which then create wealth, which then you can tax and you can get. And so we want our jobs to stay in America, obviously. There's some fears with President Biden, Biden, which is a combination of Obama and Biden. There's fears that when President-elect Biden comes to office that he's going to reverse a lot of things, including the Trump tax cuts. That could increase offshoring. He's also going to increase taxes on millionaires, which could lead individuals to wanting to keep their wealth offshore and some different things like that. So the IRS says that individuals who hire employees to replace alternative employees who are not American citizens who perform similar duties overseas will be exempt from unemployment taxes for a 2-year period. So individuals who hire Mexicans in order to do a job that Americans can do will be exempt from employment taxes for a 2-year period. Feels like that should be like opposite in there. I think this is poorly worded. Take a look at section 1A quite a bit. B, there will be denial of any tax deduction or tax credit for the cost of an American job offshoring transaction. And C, elimination of any foreign corporation deferment of income tax in connection. So basically they're going to raise taxes. The exception here is agriculture. Okay. IRS will then see it. This is one we probably should work on with a little bit more detail, maybe put Mr. Young on it. Offshoring bad is the easiest way to go here. I'm not sure that this solves it in any way, shape, or form, but we need jobs in COVID, and so you could just do offshoring bad. Anything that could increase domestic jobs is good in the face of COVID would be the easiest way to go with that on the AF. Next one is ripped from the headlines, a bill to remove the Confederacy from the U.S. military. President Trump is looking at vetoing the NDAA just because there is a clause in there that the Congress put in that it would remove Confederate generals' names from U.S. military bases. Okay, so we've got a number of military bases, particularly in the South, that are going to be named after Confederate officers, Confederate heroes, those types of things. So all properties in the DoD and the Department of Education named after Confederate officers must change their name, or they will lose 25% of federal funding. That will force them to do so. They're just going to rename some ships, those types of things. This is significantly easier to go AF, and I would highly recommend that you go AF, or else you're going to get some people very offended in the room. If you're African American, the Confederacy stood for slavery and fought to keep slavery. The U.S. military is supposed to have all Americans treated equally, fairly, respectfully, and you don't get to choose which base or ship you serve on. And so if I'm an African American soldier who wants to risk dying for my country, I sign up and they send me to a place that's named after a Confederate general who fought to keep me as property. I'm probably not going to feel very comfortable in that. And so this is a pretty easy switch. The military is for it, and there's good evidence for that. The Congress is for it, so there's good evidence there. Literally, President Trump is the only one not to. That's seen as a huge dog whistle towards the alt-right and racism and white supremacy, saying, like, they're coming after our history and those types of things. You can easily make the argument that history is for history class, not for the naming of U.S. military ships, vessels, etc., that these were essentially traitors who rebelled, tried to break the United States of America to create their own country, and they ended up losing. We shouldn't be looking at them as heroes. So once again, that's an easy one to go AF. We have two more. The next one is a bill to instill a maximum cost of college attendance. On AF here, you just make the argument that college is important, college needs to be accessible. Education is the great evener. Okay, so if certain people can only afford certain colleges and you can't get access to those types of things, you're always going to create inequality gaps and opportunity gaps in there. And so if I can afford better schooling, that's going to keep me rich and elite. If I can't afford it, it's going to keep me not rich and elite. It's going to put up barriers towards me. Okay, that's the AF argument for this. This is significantly easier to go neg. There's a couple of things. Number one, you can talk about defense, which gets to the idea that there are scholarships, there are performance benefits, there are Pell Grants, P-E-L-L. Pell Grants are for people who are less impoverished, or there are a multitude of options for you to be able to get to these universities based upon deservingness, okay? Even if it's cheap, it doesn't mean I'm going to get into Harvard. It just means that there are going to be more people that can get in, which means it's only going to be the cream of the crop that really rises to it because they're going to have so many applicants. And so it's possible that it could shut out people. But the main reason for this is these private institutions. Actually, this doesn't affect private institutions, but these public colleges which receive federal money, they spend this stuff. They're not necessarily all not-for-profit. Like, they do spend it on football coaches, and you can look, if you want to go AF on it, about how much Alabama spends on their football coach, which is absolutely insane. But they take the student tuition and they use it to hire professors. Having more money gets you better professors, better quality control, it gets you better staffing, it gets you better security. Like, they are a business, and so if you are artificially capping what it costs to go to college, in this case by a lot, like look up what a local public school, look up what Michigan State is since we're competing at Michigan State, and look up what their cost of attendance per year is, and say like, hey, every single student is going to like pay $5,000 less or so, okay? And that ultimately then could cause huge problems. There's also arguments that if you institute a ceiling, you could have other people raise rates who are below it right now, because then it creates an equal playing field, and so it's possible that they could consider raising rates in there. But they're going to have to fire a lot of people if they lose this money. And so what gets fired? Probably not the moneymakers like football, but probably student support services, security services, all those types of things. So if you can go defense and say, look, number one, there are opportunities for everybody based upon scholarships, based upon Pell Grants, other solutions, and doing this would really hurt the college model. That's how you go neg on it. If you want to go AF, college should be affordable. It's insane that it's not affordable, and it's the big way to kind of connect people. Last one is a resolution to support public defense. If you are indignant, that means as a criminal, you can't afford a lawyer. So you are able to hire a public defender. Public defenders are massively overworked. That's why I think I saw something that the average amount of time that they spend with their client is 17 minutes. And so if I'm accused of a crime, I get a public defense lawyer. That public defense lawyer might spend 10 minutes with me before telling me what to do that is going to affect the rest of my life. About 95% of all cases go plea bargaining. That's because it's the quickest, swiftest way to do so, and these public defenders are completely overworked. The government is the prosecution in all federal and state criminal cases where public defense is a guaranteed right. They are getting 3 to 4 to 5 times the money and the staff, meaning that they can overwhelm the public defenders, and typically that's where you can make more money salary-wise, so the better lawyers are already going there as well. So this is just a resolution rather than a bill, meaning it doesn't actually do anything, okay? But all it does is basically pledge the fact that these people need more work. They need help, they need assistance, and they are undercovered and everything like that, and so we should support them. So I think that is an easy one to go AF. It's very easy to research. Just look up public defenders reform, and you will find a ton of AF arguments on it, okay? that should get you started, and then we can talk about more specific details as you go through. But once again, I would just write an outline for one of the sides of each bill. Be ready to give a 3-minute speech on them. It doesn't matter if the arguments are basic. We just want to get up and speak because I want you guys watching and observing what some really talented kids are doing. And I hope you envision yourself being able to do what it is that they're doing, those types of things. All right?